you know, cultural stories that can be shared, or even the history of tribes, or uh, like an anthropology podcast as well, talking about how, our communities lived, and diving into that. I could see that continuing to share that space. And again, with programs like the residency that Johnny Carson Center puts on, I was very fortunate enough to join this year. If you didn't see my big bushy head in the photo earlier, um, but having opportunities like that where, people from these communities can come learn about motion capture, game development, or virtual production, like Alika learned. She was also part of the residency. I think that helps expand the space.
Yeah, one of the things that really inspired me that Black Public Media has done for a long time, simply because they have the Black Public Media Plus arm to their organisation, is they've developed what they call the watch list, which is basically a long list of experiences, be they VR, AR, mobile games, apps, experimental movies, whatever, like almost developing the canon of the emerging media tech about the Black experience. And so the artists have to engage with that for an hour every afternoon. And so we started to do that this time to be able to share with Vision Maker Media, so that collecting not just from America, but from Australia and Canada and other places where there may have been more funding, which there has been in Australia anyway, for those kinds of developing those kinds of experiences, so that people can see what is possible, because unless you see it, you can't be it, right? So we need to be, so unless young people have access to these kinds of tools and tech, they can't imagine making stories within them. So, yeah.
Yeah, the accessibility helps, just expand the creative capacity that one can have. And kind of, again, building again off this accessibility, but on the other end, we're talking about young, now let's talk about the elders. And I know, like, for example, it took me a couple of hours to even get my grandma logged into like Facebook. So, and so there is this side of, yes, the elders are likely not going to be the ones doing the motion capture suits and things like that, but how do you see the way to kind of integrate them and include them in this? Like we talked about, being able to preserve the oral history and things like that, and just like podcasts and everything. But do you guys have any other thoughts on how to, kind of include that elder voice and get them to kind of feel like they're getting into the high techness of it all?
I had worked on a project before I graduated college where we were going out into the Menominee Forest and taking 360 video of specific historical sites. And one of the intents behind that was to share that video as a virtual experience for people who, one, don't live up on the Menominee Reservation anymore, but still have that connection, or for elders who are in our elder care system who can't really go to those spaces. And, by capturing those locations and putting them in a virtual environment, our hope was that elders could, throw the headset on and have a similar connection to that space, see that space, be in that space that they have been unable to access for some time. And even through that experience, they could have conversations with their children and grandchildren about, what they have learned there, their memories with those locations, and, share that oral tradition by employing digital media.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, I've seen that also be incredibly powerful. And the other thing is, why not put them in motion capture suits? Because most of the data we have captured of bodies, and the data that they even use to say how many people can sit in here for fire thing is the bodies of white men from the 60s who are astronauts, right? It's outdated. This is what they use in architecture. So capturing other bodies is really important. And there is an artist, I know an artist whose work is capturing a lot of Black bodies, but there's also other researchers collecting otherly abled bodies, Indigenous bodies, to have, to record movement and dance and song and things, but also to have those bodies as contributing to how we design and think about space just generally, you know? So
That's interesting. Yeah. Thanks for checking me on that.
no,
I don't
bring it up. Yeah.
So I got, we kind of talked about this a little bit too, as well, with this mixing journalism in with these new technologies. And I was wondering, what would you say to somebody who was maybe just like, you know, traditionalism shouldn't be with this technology. We shouldn't be using it for oral history, things like that. Because I know there are a few people who do feel like that and do kind of see, you know, like we have to keep this to ourselves. We can't band. So what would you say to kind of convince them otherwise and just help them see the other perspective?
I would say that there's some instances in where they're right, where you know, there's some stories that we can't tell, that can't be shared or recorded in a digital medium. But for those stories that can be shared, I think sharing them in a more accessible medium like film or you know, audio recordings will help non-Indigenous people come to understand us better, because that's how they access stories these days, and that's what they're used to. Um, it's almost like we have to meet them where they are so that they can learn about us and, you know, understand us and, you know, come to broaden their own horizons. That would be the argument that I would make.
And I have nothing to add to that. That's exactly right. Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure, yeah. Time. Okay. So as we're you know, we're pushing forward and this futurizing and indigenizing media, not just in the sense of creativity, but we're also being able to see the educational part of it, and the importance of that. And so, you know, specifically with the residency that you're doing, and so I was just wondering when, you know, how do we see, you know, futurizing media as not just expanding creativity, but also in a more educational capacity? If you wanted to speak towards that.
I think if we can provide any mentorship, it's also about creating networks amongst each other, right? Like experts in these fields who might be from other places, who are also First Nations people. But like, what is the necessity for it to be in VR, or what is the necessity for it to be in AR? And not just from an accessible point of view, but what makes sense to the story. So I think that providing mentorship around that, and then access to the tools to those platforms that make the most sense for that story, is the most important thing. And I think, as you were saying, maybe one of the most important things right now still is accessibility, which is why it's important to make games that are web-based and not Sony PlayStation based, right? So thinking about those tools too. But for us, it's in the next iteration of the residency, it would be working with Vision Maker Media and the artists to work out, well, what is the thing that we can offer? Like this year, we got in specific expertise for your project around Unity, which we just didn't have in-house. Or what are the spaces that artists or fellows from Vision Maker Media want to explore? Is it LiDAR scanning? Is it motion capture? Is it, you know, AI work production flows? Is it working in Unreal, or, you know, whatever it is, so that we can help curate the best experience possible? You know, that's all we're interested in.
Yeah, and you know, with my experience during the residency, the fact that you're able to offer, you know, again, those lessons in Unreal, motion capture, and you know, specialized stuff like with me, um, it it's very helpful for those people that can't access that on their own time or in their communities. I definitely think, you know, opening up that knowledge base and sharing it with people and continuing to build those experts in those remote communities will definitely see a lot of growth for not just Indigenous media, but all forms of media.
And, you know, and then maybe it's also about long-term relationships, right? Because maybe one day you'll think, yeah, I could send my kids off to them. They're all right. you know, they're good. Like, you know, it takes time. So
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, I guess, going off that, how you're saying there's just so many different mediums to hop into. And I know that can kind of be, overwhelming, like looking at like, oh, like which is my niche, which is my specialty. So I guess what would you say to someone who's younger and kind of wants to get into it, but they're just so like, oh my God, there's so many different things to do, and like they have mentorships and all these opportunities, but how to kind of just put them at ease of like, just get them inspired to do this rather than looking at it and just kind of being daunted.
I mean, I started off learning how to do documentary work in high school because of a youth program. Um, and that really just opened up the gates for me. It's like, oh my goodness, this is a potential future for me. But I ended up going into video game design because my love for video games outweighed my love for documentary work. But for, the youth, just giving them the opportunities to test out these mediums in a safe environment where they have experts that can teach them and guide them, I think that allows them to kind of become comfortable with that and see, oh yeah, I can do this. This is a viable option for me. Um, or even just, everybody's got a phone on them, just
Yeah.
having them test out like filming something on their phone. Uh, or what was that?
CapCut,
Our
TikTok.
CapCut,
Yeah.
yeah, TikToks and all that. There's so many existing applications that help promote this as
Mhm.
a viable future for them.
And it helps seeing other Indigenous people already in the fields.
I mean, you can't be an expert in everything. So understanding different areas, right? So that as long as you can have conversations with people and see what's possible, I think that's critical. Because again, I'm very old, and I just remember when people didn't, when games and the film industry was like, you're the devil, like, like you are terrible. The internet, go away, you awful thing. And it's still like that in some areas. So being able to understand and communicate with each other to develop trust so that you can find the best things that you need for your project. But, and above all, as we all know, the story above all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's definitely to totally just lost my train of thought. But yeah, and then so it's yeah, like you said, it's important to, kind of meet them there and give them the safe space and um be able to, kind of foster that and watch it grow into more. And again, finding existing passions they already had, like you said, and you just already love video games and it just made sense. Um, so I just wanted to say thank you both for all the amazing answering first of all the amazing work that you've done, and then being able to really expand on it and what the future looks like, and for both elders and youth alike. So I would like to take this time now to open up to questions. I believe, yes, we have a mic that's going to be going around here in a second.
Kirsty.
So Jacob, I have a question. So you were talking about a headset. How exactly, what kind of system do you need to play it on? Are you playing it on the computer? How do you play the game?
Um, so for that project that I had done back in college, it was the Oculus Go, which was one of the first major headsets to come out. Um, we had just used Unity and built right onto the headset. So it was fairly simple. But now they have, the Oculus Store that you can publish to as well. For this game, our intent is that anybody with a computer and a web browser should be able to play it, so that it's highly accessible. Um, and that's something to consider when you're developing a video game. It's like, what platform do you want it to go to? How accessible do you want it to be? And what kind of stipulations are there for like which marketplace you're going to deliver it on? For this game, since we want it to be highly accessible, we're putting it right on to PBS stations' websites. For another project that Nebraska Public Media had done, which was a virtual museum for Morrill Hall at University of Nebraska-Lincoln. We had done a mobile version, so it's on the App Store, the Android store. We have a web version, which is up on our website, and we also have a VR version, which is up on the Oculus store. So it's all about finding which platforms you want to go to.
One other suggestion too. It would be really cool to do one that's like an interactive powwow, because I really want to be a jingle dancer and there's no way that's going to happen. So it'd be really fun to have an avatar and be able to do that and be part of the culture and interact.
That would be super cool. I think that would be awesome as like a VR experience. So we might have to talk.
But see, exactly. So this is why having access to the canon is so important, right? Because Gabe Aurora did a beautiful one like that, where you could dance with Sufi dancers and you're all joined in a circle. This is like from 2016. So yeah, being able to have access to those things, so then you can imagine it and then build it, right?
Okay, we got another question over here. And I'll teach you how to jingle dress.
Hi, Jacob, my question is for you. So what does the next phase of production look like for you, and when can we see the project complete?
So the next phase of production has been, we have these mini games developed, we have the story written and put into almost interactive form. Right now, what we've been doing is melding the two together so that we have a complete game that's playable, but still in its early stages, so that we're able to play through the whole experience in one go. Yeah, that's what we've been doing for almost like the last month and a half. And yeah, for release date, we're looking to launch in May of 2025. So right around the corner. But yeah, it's definitely been very fun kind of seeing this game come together in that environment.
Awesome. I guess, yeah, kind of to throw you a similar question. Well, how do you see the future of the Johnny Carson program? You just said you had 160 students as of right now? Yeah.
It's a big question I'm working on, but I think for us, one of the things that I chose to come here and to move to Nebraska was because it is really interdisciplinary, and also it's land grant mission. And so that's one of the reasons our doors is open, right? You know, we have a mission. We are supposed to be taking knowledge we create and spreading it amongst community. So that's why access to our tools. I want to raising money right now to establish not just an artist residency, but an incubator, so that people could actually come and use these tools, work with our students and build new works across multiple platforms, and works that have a place to land, right? So to help people also out with distribution and thinking through that, or exhibition or performance, or all those kinds of things. We're actually also looking to address like the urban blight around the university. So to open up all of the abandoned shops, to have access to artist studios or pop-up shops or things for our students. You know, I'm interested in building a graduate program. And the other mission of the college or the university is not for me to increase the number of majors, but for me to increase interdisciplinarity. So to be offering access to students in engineering, computer science, history, journalism, all of those things. So that they're the big ones for me. And to build pathways, right? Again, these tools, I mean, how many dead headsets have I collected in 7 years or 6 years, right? It's like this fossil, it's like a cemetery of headsets on the upper shelf, you know, which is why people shouldn't be investing them. You should go to a university that's got a land grant mission and say, hey, can I play? And I invite all of you to come and play with those tools, like come and, you know, if it's for a day or an afternoon or a weekend or whatever, just to have access. You know, I think that's critical.
Yeah. Yeah, I just bought the Oculus 2 and it's already been replaced by the Oculus 3.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it would have been great to just test it out.
Exactly, get someone else to take the risk.
Yeah. Let's see how long my PlayStation 5 lasts. Uh, is there any other questions? I know is there any on Huva? Oh, sorry.
Hi, so I'm pretty sure you're aware of Minecraft recently. Like, there was a bunch of users that came together and had like their own powwow. So, yeah, there was a bunch of like, so I think with what you're doing, is there an opportunity to maybe have like an open kind of like online play eventually where it could be more immersive in the sense of maybe having users participate, like being a jingle dancer or assuming these different powwow um, uh, dances of sorts. So I think that what I'm trying to say is that there is definitely interest, and I think like maybe exploring some of that immersiveness of having online play would be something beneficial.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about that Minecraft powwow at all,
Yeah,
so I'm gonna have to Google that now. Um, but yeah, right now, the game is set to just be like a solo experience. But that's not to say that, the framework isn't there after the project to potentially create an experience like that. And I think that might have some potential, that might be good potentially, especially with the comment about learning jingle dress through a virtual experience. Yeah, that sounds like we need to talk about a potential game. So
Well, I love this because that's what it comes back to is the ideas it sparks and the way it connects you all. My question was if you see this headed towards more of a high school educational option, if you could see that in those classrooms at all.
Um, so the goal for this game specifically is for general audiences, but one of the hopes is in the state of Wisconsin, we have Act 31, which requires the instruction of Indigenous histories all throughout high school and middle school, and I think elementary school, so all throughout the school years. And the hope is that this becomes something that can potentially have a lesson plan developed around it and and be used to kind of open up discussion about Menominee history. And if there's more games about other tribes, that would be very cool too. Yeah.
Awesome. Just a quick housekeeping note. I wanted to let everyone know that there is water and coffee in the lobby right by the restrooms. And then we have a question coming to us from those participating with us on Huva. So thank you. Welcome all on Huva. So our question comes from Joshua. Speaking to the future, what are your thoughts about partnering with other Indigenous communities to support their work in continuing to push their language and culture forward? The language and culture.
That's important. A lot of us are at risk at losing our language. So finding, new mediums that allow the instruction of that would be highly beneficial. So yeah, creating games that help teach the language would be very important. Um, yeah, I think if we can build those relationships with other tribes and reach out to them, ask what their needs are, we could potentially develop something that helps assist in that. I know I'm specifically talking about language here, but even sharing the cultural elements so that, if that's shared at tribal high schools or tribal middle schools, they have the accessibility to learn those elements through play. So yeah, I would love to continue to build relationships out to develop games like that. That would be very cool.
Awesome. Thank you, Joshua. Yeah, and I would just echo that. You're taking it back to culture and taking it back to the people, right? And then that's where a vision maker and other entities like us can step in and help you reach those cultures.
Yeah, I definitely agree too, especially, seeing our little film at the beginning of how Vision Maker started as telecommunications and we're up here talking about AI and augmented reality. It's very inspiring, like Brittany was saying, the spark and ignite. Um, and so, as I lost my train of thought, sorry. So just as we are looking towards the future, and I mean, obviously this is a futurizing and indigenizing panel. What does the word even just indigenizing mean to you guys? That is a very so like, I guess when you're applying it to technology, and we're talking about like, yes, there's this language part of it and this educational part, but is there any other part of like, what does indigenizing mean? What does introducing indigenous beliefs and communities and thought processes to the rest of the world look like?
I think it comes down to the process at which we create this media. Kind of speaking to the video game that I'm working on, making sure that, indigenous voices are connected with that and have an input on that, to share, their expertise and ensure that we're being accurate about what we're depicting, is fairly important. But also, perhaps changing the approach at which we develop these things. Whether, it's more of a collaborative process that invites community members, or specifically elders as well, into the fold to share their ideas and potential ways of going about it. I think that can help indigenize media.
Yeah, it's about protocols. In Australia, at the Australian Film, Television, Radio School, a professor there, Dr. Terry, and I can't think of her last name, so I apologize, wrote protocols for working with Indigenous filmmakers and stories on Indigenous land. So recognizing that every time you made anything in Australia, you're working on Indigenous land, and what the protocols were to do that. And every student who goes there has to take that course, like to graduate. So I would be well open to collaborating with Vision Maker Media or whoever to learn about creating some protocols that students might now have to learn before they use some of these tools, or before they work on a film set, or, starting things like that. And I think also thinking about platform thinking, so that if you want to create multiple games or apps or things that are around culture and language, is an idea about developing some kind of platform or template or things like that that could then be replicated or built out to be more efficient. Because one of the problems that we all face, of course, when we build with these tools is updates, and then error 504 or 404, or, and so that adds to the ongoing cost and budget of keeping things up to date so that they don't break when the new headsets come out. So it's like owning a boat in a way, in some ways, right? So that's something also to be thought of, because I was just thinking when you were talking about Minecraft, we built a whole heap of stuff in Mozilla Hubs, which was an online world that Mozilla created, the ones that create the Firefox brand, and they've just discontinued. So all of that work's now no longer accessible. So you're often at the mercy of the platform owners. So that's something else to be thinking about all the time too.
Absolutely. I know there's like shows being wiped off the planet because the streamer is taking it off. It's crazy. Yeah, I also kind of going back to the protocols you're talking about. I had a professor before he was a native professor, older Ojibwe man, and he would start off all of his courses, the first 2 classes, he would kind of explain, okay, I'm Indigenous, this is how I teach, because there is this different form of teaching. So he's kind of like, if you think I'm rambling, I'm not, like, this is how it is. And so, do you see kind of like that, kind of having to, is like a way to, like you're saying, these protocols, and is there any like specific things that you can think of that is about how to like introduce people of like, okay, you're coming into this Indigenous space created by Indigenous people, this is how we talk, this is how we interact, and this is how you can learn. Yeah, like So is there any like thoughts on like how you would do that? I know you were mentioning protocols but even when it comes to, like younger kids who are like playing the game, and I will say younger kids are they're a lot smarter than people give them credit for. They pick up on stuff a lot more. But I guess how do you kind of make that like inclusive to all ages, and how do you kind of create those protocols in a sense that can be adapted to all ages and not just college and elders and things like that? Kind of a large question there.
It's a really good question too. Yeah. Yeah, geez, it's got to be more about how you communicate it to the youth than the actual content, because you can distill the protocols down into a way where, for example, if you're in a video game, you can even have like one character say, "Oh, it's interesting how like grandpa tells these circular stories or something," and kind of highlighting that so that they can understand that's kind of how this information is taught. So kind of giving a person to highlight that, or even pulling it out and highlighting it, might be a way to approach that for young media consumers.
Yeah. There's always that struggle of like, you want to teach these kids of, the history, but history is not always pretty sometimes. And so like that balance too, and then also how to communicate to them, inspire them. So yeah, really like that. Is there anything you would like to add, Megan?
For creators, so often also then that tension, if it's with a game, with the mechanics of gameplay, and how that works. And it's like serious games, right? Like, but it can work. Like serious games, like I'm going to teach young people how to eat, and then we're going to do this, and then they're going to eat the vegetables, and then we're going to take them out and they're going to eat the pig. Didn't really have any impact. But Noah Falstein, who's called the father of serious games, he just had a game that was approved by the FDA to be a prescription for ADHD. So it's so we can learn from science, and we can learn from these people who are creating games for medical output. So he's creating a game that actually has a real impact on the body. So we could learn from that potentially to create games that have better learning outcomes for young people, for any person. Yeah.
And even when dealing with like, more serious topics like, some of the more brutal aspects of our collective history, that the kids should still learn that, but in a way that, doesn't scar them for life. I know when I was young, my first grade teacher was teaching us about Thanksgiving, and she made the choice to not tell us that what actually happened. She said, "Oh, they sat down, had dinner, and everything was fine." And when I went back home and told my mom, who's also a teacher, she became so livid. And I didn't believe her when she told me the actual history. So if we, skimp out on the actual history, we're doing more damage to the youth by telling them what really happened. Yeah, no, after, my mom told me and I still didn't believe her, she had to go to that teacher, write a strongly worded letter, blow up at the principal and everything, and have that teacher tell the whole class the actual history of what happened at the first Thanksgiving. So yeah, we gotta be aware that, the truth is important, but figure out how to tell that in a manageable way for them.
Yeah. And the way to do that is futurizing and indigenizing media. We covered a lot in this session about the intersections of technology and culture and art. So as we wrap up, I was wondering if you guys have any final thoughts that you would like to share, any last messages you want to send off to anybody who's interested in this type of field.
Oh, just that we're open for business, right? I mean, and we just love collaborating and learning. And so if you have any ideas, or please come and chat to me. Would love to.
Yeah, and I'll just say, anybody can make games. It's something that people have been doing for generations and generations. It doesn't have to be as fancy as a computer game. So if anybody has, any ideas for a game and want to make that, I can offer assistance, and we can make something that's physical first or digital later. So yeah, anybody can do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for being on this panel, and sharing all of your wisdom. So thank you. Give it a round of applause.